Welcome to the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. I'm your host, Raphael Rosengarten, CEO and co-founder of Genialis, the RNA biomarker company. On this podcast, we discuss the future of healthcare and health technology, and how advances in data and data science are fueling the next industrial revolution. If you have not already, please subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And for more information on Genialis and our unique approach to AI-driven precision medicine, please visit our website at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com. Now, on to the show. This episode features a conversation with Shweta Maniar, who leads a healthcare and life science effort at Google Cloud. In just a few short years, artificial intelligence has gone from the stuff of hype and fairy tale to powerful and ubiquitous tools for all aspects of R&D and healthcare delivery. Google has been central to this sea change. I discuss with Shweta how her organization helps make these advanced capabilities available to the masses, and so much more. Join us. Welcome everyone to this episode of Talking Precision Medicine. My guest today is Shweta Maniar, Global Director of Healthcare and Life Sciences for Google Cloud. Shweta, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Lovely to be here.
So let's jump right in. Tell us, what is healthcare and life sciences at Google Cloud? What is your role and what excites you most about what you're doing there?
So, as you mentioned, right, I'm responsible for our healthcare and life sciences here at Google Cloud. From a global perspective, it's looking at the strategy. In a nutshell, I'm responsible for how do we win in the industry, right? How do we take some of the fantastic technology that Google has created for itself, for the consumer space, and new AI innovation that's coming out every day, and how do we appropriately apply it to support the healthcare and life science ecosystem? I focus much more on the life sciences side. So very much focused on how do we help pharmaceutical organizations, biotechnology, looking at medical devices and diagnostic organizations. And so what really excites me about this is being able to leverage technology to actually make a very real difference in people's lives, whether it's how they interact with their healthcare system or the type of medicine that they're receiving due to some type of innovation. I think that there's so much that we can take from what we're doing here today and what actually is going to be happening or impacting the way that we look at healthcare and get healthcare delivered in the future.
Got it. And so if your constituency or your clients are life science companies, for example, does that mean that you're putting out products for them, or are you building sort of the enabling technology? So is this more of like the picks and shovels?
Wonderful question. It really is around the enabling technologies. How do we, as Google Cloud and Google support with our capabilities, with specific use cases added on top? We are very, very heavy on the partner side as well. So looking at the partner ecosystem as an avenue. So we are looking at how do we be an enabler, right? Not a competitor in this space. How do we enable you, life science organization, to do what you already do better, faster, more efficiently, and more cost effectively?
I want to dig into this a little more, maybe from two angles. Maybe you could provide us just a couple use cases. They could be anonymized if that helps. So what are the kinds of problems that a life science organization would come to Google Cloud to solve? In other words, what are they coming to find on your platform? And then maybe the flip side of that is, you mentioned helping bring some of Google's amazing technology to the cloud. Perhaps you could provide some examples of just kind of cool new tech, or sort of new tech, that's been successfully or well received by the life science industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So through Google Cloud for Healthcare and Life Sciences, right, it is really around providing secure and scalable infrastructure to store and analyze and scale health data, right? Health information. You can enable researchers or clinicians to collaborate more effectively, right? That's kind of table stakes. But really, when you're focusing at how you take a look at this Google Cloud technology, it really is creating solutions and offerings. And I'll give you some specifics in a moment, but around how do you improve patient care? So, how can you provide tools to, for example, clinicians to access patient information quickly? How can you accelerate research? So, allowing researchers, if you're in the early R of a pharma company, or you're sitting in a biotech organization, or you're actually sitting at a large government research institute, how do you allow researchers to analyze large data sets run complex simulations, do some predictions with the idea that you could have faster discoveries in drug development or in genomics, for example. And all of this, I would say, is another area is around advancing public health. So working with different public health agencies, helping them to use data and AI to track and make more, predict outbreaks, improve surveillance, being much more proactive than reactive. And so to give you some specifics, I often talk about, for example, with Bayer, we are working with, it's a very publicly known reference. Google Cloud is working with Bayer on developing synthetic data for oncology research. So looking at synthetic images of cancerous tissues and then training AI algorithms. Bayer is doing this to train AI algorithms to detect and diagnose cancer more accurately, right? Or that is the goal, particularly in rare cancers where real world data is limited. Um, then we also have an announcement very recently, today, around what work that we're doing with Recursion Pharmaceuticals, and Recursion is, for those who may not know in the audience, a clinical stage biotech company. And they're looking at leveraging Google Cloud to analyze biological images at scale. So this idea of building a massive data set with cellular images and then using Google Cloud's AI to identify some of the patterns and the insights and such. For Recursion, it's in the realm of neurodegeneration and cancer. But these are just a couple of examples. There's many, many more, right? With Schrodinger and looking at how they are working in computational drug discovery. And then there's others where we're actually working with other organizations. It's a much more straightforward use case, which is around there is a mid-sized pharmaceutical organization that is looking at how do we more efficiently package up and create and design an IND or NDA, a new drug application. And so how do you use generative AI to create perhaps the first draft of that? Or how do you design components of your packet that need to be reviewed? Things like that. So there's a lot of use cases on how you take a look at AI. I think tech has a role in the healthcare ecosystem. We can certainly have a dialogue around this, but 10 years ago, I think tech was looked at as a external player to the healthcare ecosystem. You've got payers, you've got providers, you've got your, medicine manufacturers and your devices and such. Here, I think we're coming to a point where now tech is a little bit on the underpinning or the foundational aspect of how the healthcare ecosystem works. I just think that how it's leveraged and how regulatory bodies work with us to get to that point, I think is that's the part that's still being worked through. But now it's no longer a question of, is tech a part of this? I think it's going to be around how we leverage technology in a safe and repeatable manner.
That's really impressive and quite a range of use cases. I mean, I remember in the early days of my involvement here using Google Cloud, but at the time the concern was simply compute, right? We needed efficient, scalable compute and data storage, and it needed to be accessible everywhere. I feel like we've really hit these inflection points over the last few years in the robustness and general, widespread adoption of AI, or at least the desire, the urge to adopt, right? That it makes sense now that it's no longer just can we crunch our bioinformatics pipelines, but now there's so much more discovery that can be done in the cloud.
Exactly.
These are really, really exciting examples. And just to say it again for the audience, we talked about using AI to analyze images, using AI to generate new data, right? And then running lots of other kinds of algorithms. So that addresses some of the sort of like big problems you're trying to solve. I'm interested to take a step back and kind of hear more about your journey and how you got to what is truly the bleeding edge of the interface of technology and the healthcare space. You were a researcher first and then a business person, and now I guess still a business person, a strategist. Tell us a little more about your story, whether backwards or forwards, whichever way you like to tell it.
Yeah. I'll maybe start with the ending, which is, 10 years ago, if you said that I would be at a large, well-known tech company, I would not have believed that that would be where I am. It was not part of the plan. I think that each experience led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. And you and I can agree that probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, a role that I have that I've shared with you about today probably didn't exist, right? So it wasn't something that one could aspire to be or have. My career actually started out during my time when I was in San Diego, where I was working at Scripps Health. And I was working in translational orthopedic research. I had worked alongside surgeons and scientists at the Shiley Center for Orthopedic Research and Education at Scripps. which was really focused on developing new treatments for musculoskeletal diseases. I really had a chance to develop an appreciation for research and patient care because of that experience, right? And a lot of it was also getting some pretty, I would say, very core hands-on experience on how to use the confocal microscope. How do you work with cadavers on a daily basis? Really a lot. I mean, it was very as stereotypical research as you could have expected for translational orthopedic research. But then with a few jumps here and there, I actually spent some time at the Cleveland Clinic where it really, that's where I got to go a little bit more into what I would consider bench research around musculoskeletal diseases and had the opportunity to really give some thought to when people are doing experiments, what is actually the role of a researcher, right? Rigorous methodology, data analysis, repeatability, traceability, scientific validation, papers, posters, all of that. In addition to that, I also have a lot more respect for those who work on the bench on a daily basis and live grant to grant. That's a whole different conversation. Once finishing out at the Cleveland Clinic, I actually did a few roles where it was looking at nonprofit biotech that was looking at how do we almost like tech transfer, taking ideas out of somebody, a surgeon's or a hospital administrator's head, and then combining that with research that's happening in a university. How do you actually commercialize that? Whether that's creating a patent, whether it's licensing, whether it's spinning out a company out of that. So once I did that for a few years, I returned back to California, looking at joining Genentech, where I really transitioned into what I would call the biotech pharma industry. But it was still in the same vein where it was really trying to understand how does, in this case, not a typical hospital or institute, but rather a typical pharma company, look at how do they apply technology. This is now where it became that, if you remember, right, the beyond the pill, right? Everybody used to say that. How do you provide value to beyond the pill? And this is, 10 plus years ago when everyone was trying to think if your phone app could, diagnose your blindness, right? And now, does that mean that Genentech now needs to start building apps alongside, their medication that they, Lucentis that they've created? So there was a lot of conversations around that at that time. That all of these experiences really gave me not only an understanding and appreciation for all these various parts of the healthcare and life science ecosystem, but also gave me a chance to think maybe much more holistically, that you can approach problems from multiple angles. It allowed me to think through, you can bridge the gap, right? Communicate with a diverse set of teams. If you're trying to take a researcher's idea and trying to spin it out into a company, you can absolutely bet, right, that I've had to communicate with not only the business stakeholders, but the medical and then the research. So that was a thread that was common in all of the kind of career jumps that I have done. And so once I got to Google, I realized that ultimately the journey has been around connecting dots between research and innovation technology for this healthcare and life science ecosystem. And so that's exactly what I strive to do here at Google. How do you leverage technology to translate scientific discoveries into much meaningful solutions, right? And help other organizations to do that even better.
Thank you for sharing that journey. That's fascinating. While we're on your CV, I see you also do a fair amount of sort of board of directors and volunteer work. Tell me a little bit about that. How do you kind of choose your, we'll call them extracurricular professional obligations, and what do
Yes,
you
I
see
think
you
being
get out of that?
on a board or boards have actually allowed me to be very, very thoughtful about how businesses make decisions. And I think it actually helps both ways, right? It helps me in the job that I'm doing as to how can a Google or how can a technology company truly help organizations, because you're really understanding from a board level, what are they grappling with? What is top of mind? It's very easy to sit on the sidelines and say, I think the industry needs this. So it really does give me a flavor of being able to see like what is happening right now in the healthcare and in the life science industry. I think you're also mentioning maybe when it comes to volunteering, it's around I sit on my city government's Parks and Recreation Commission. And there's a lot of jokes in there, right? I know, well aware,
It's a
but
great show.
it is a great show. It is a great show. And I tell everybody it's exactly like that experience. But jokes aside, it is something I've always been really passionate about, city government and civic duty. But also, we live in such a fast paced world. Also, I work for a fast paced company. It's sometimes very easy to get into a bubble of how we work and how fast we work. I think it's such an important way to not only give back to the community, but I think I'm also learning how you interact with everyone and how you listen to each other's ideas and take the time to slow down a little bit and realize that some of the biggest problems to me are not actually the biggest problems to others. And frankly, also it's a good way to practice the art of convincing others who are absolutely not on, not anywhere near on your page. And so I think it's a fantastic way to give back to the community, to know what's happening in my community, and be able to take an active role in that. But also, it is really, really good, eye opening experience to be able to actually interact with your community as a whole.
I absolutely love that. I was just having this conversation with my 10-year-old on the morning after the recent election and sort of like, well, what do we do now? Right. And irrespective of your feelings on the outcome of the election, it's well, now we figure out what's important to us and we go into the community and we promote our values through engagement. Right.
Yep, exactly.
Google obviously is a global company. My company is a lot smaller than yours, but also global by design. And so we have to think about the scales, everything from the most local to things that impact people around the world, I think. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Talking Precision Medicine, powered by Genialis. We'll return shortly with more of this insightful conversation. In today's episode, Shweta Maniar discusses the transformative impact of AI and the importance of strategic collaboration in healthcare and life sciences. Reflecting these themes, Genialis has made significant advances in 2024, notably with the introduction of the Genialis supermodel. The supermodel is the world's first RNA-based foundation model of cancer biology that drives biomarker discovery by mapping biological states across diverse patient samples, enabling precision prediction of drug responses. As a key proof of concept, we launched Genialis KRAS ID, the first biomarker panel both necessary and sufficient to predict clinical benefit to KRAS-targeted therapeutics. This first-in-class biomarker is already being evaluated by several top 20 pharmaceutical companies for its ability to transform patient stratification. As we look forward to 2025, we're excited to continue this journey of innovation and hope to stay connected with you. Happy holidays. Let's turn back to work a little bit. There's something that I wanted to clear up because I just learned this myself. So your focus is within the Google Cloud part of the organization. Google also has Google Health, which is something different than what you do. Could you draw the distinction for us and help us understand what the two organizations do and if there is crosstalk or interaction or pollination of ideas?
I think the best way to think about it is Google Cloud is the foundation, right? We've talked about this as an infrastructure piece, and we are very, very well entwined with our sister organization, with Google Health, that I would almost consider, if you're looking at Google Cloud as a foundation, Google Health can be considered maybe like a specialized house that's on top of it, right? On top of that foundation. So Google Cloud's going to be focused on developing and creating the infrastructure and services that's going to be specific for any industry, including healthcare and life sciences. So the way I describe it, right? So it's like, if you've got your foundation, it's your land, it's your building materials, it's your utilities, it's all of that. And then Google Health has really taken some of those building blocks and sometimes focusing on creating specific solutions tailored for a specific purpose, right? So if I am going to carry my analogy further, it's like looking at Google Health as the architecture and the interior design of this, right? So they are focused on equity and access, democratization of data, creating patient engagement solutions. So there is, of course, a lot of cross-pollination and overlap because a lot of what they're doing, and we would work on how do we construct some of our technology to support that and vice versa. Right here, we've got some capabilities. How does it apply? And so that's a big piece, right? Google Cloud's focus in healthcare and life sciences is one of many industries we serve.
Mhm.
A key difference is Google Health is very laser focused in healthcare. That's a key distinction, I think, not just from a kind of the foundation and the infrastructure piece, but also where we focus. Google Cloud is, of course, focused on multiple industries, regulated and unregulated as well.
Well, so let's jump into that a little bit. So Google Cloud itself serves lots of industries, and so I imagine if the model sort of stamps, you need to have technology products for lots of different use cases that may be vertical specific, but maybe not. And of course, there's Google as, it's a huge product lineup, invents lots of technologies. What does the process look like for thinking, man, this is a really cool technology. We should think about, making this available to our life science audience, or maybe this solution that's currently being used for a fintech would also help with X, Y, or Z in the healthcare side. Where do those ideas come from? What is the process internally for thinking about which products to promote onto the cloud for your domain?
Absolutely right. Google Cloud does serve a wide variety of industries, like retail, media, finance, healthcare, and life sciences, and both focus on a general purpose as well as vertical specific, right? One of the things that Google, and I think many have realized over the last several years, particularly post the pandemic, is that these industries are not as different as we might historically have thought. And I say that when I'm saying, for example, if you have a solution for the finance world around insurance, how different is that from the needs of technology solutions that you would in a healthcare insurance, right? So there's been a lot of those kind of overlaps that we see. So your question is really around like what is the process, and what are some of the things? There's no one way that something gets to market or gets developed, but I think part of this is having a very strong pulse on what's the latest research, what are the trends, what are the regulatory changes that are happening, and most importantly, what are customers or what is the industry focused on, right? This comes back to the conversation that we were having earlier around boards. I think sitting on boards that are related to the industry that I'm in really, really helped me keep a pulse on like how are these boards thinking about the allocation of resources, what is important, what is shifting in the regulatory landscape that is impacting the way businesses can be run. And so there's a lot of that. I think then there's the more proactive of, right, getting the pulse from the market, but really engaging with specific healthcare and life science stakeholders. Really working through our teams who are on the ground or having advisory boards and such, really collaborating with different providers and researchers and pharmaceutical groups and biotech. And then what we're also doing internally. So I've shared everything, right? Trends, external, but then internally also looking at what are our capabilities. There are capabilities, for example, with Vertex AI and being able to search using Vertex AI. Now we have Vertex AI for healthcare, where you are now looking for healthcare specific data. What was the delta that needed to be tweaked? What were the resources that we needed, and what are we going to solve for? Right. I think part of the evolution is also focusing on things that are going to monumentally or materially at least shift the industry versus I think this would be cool, so let me just build it, right? I think that's that's a shift in the way that
Right.
the organizations are working now. Is how is this actually going to support you in this industry? And so, I mean, Vertex AI for the audience is so fantastic. It's like so amazing because when you're looking at Vertex AI, it is how you can create net new information and use the power of AI, but also detect brand new patterns or images, right? So I always use the food analogy, and I think I'm going to use it right now because I'm a little hungry. If you've got all your ingredients, right, your data that you're going to put into this machine, you've got all your compute power, which is all your appliances in a kitchen, you've got some recipes, right? These are the algorithms. But when you put it all together, this is the power of what Vertex AI can do. It can prepare your data, chop your data if I'm going to keep using that same analogy. So your data is ready to use in the format that you want it. It can suggest and predict information or the output of your recipe based on some of the information. And I think that's been a big piece of. So I'm going a little deep on Vertex, but this was first initially created industry agnostic. But imagine now how you can use Vertex AI for healthcare. What does that mean for our industry? Well, if I just shared with you what Vertex AI can do, now it's how can you use Vertex to analyze images and then detect anomalies in a different way? How can you look at that in a drug discovery context to sift through massive data sets and identify potential targets, effectiveness, optimizing clinical trial design? You can see all the use cases that come after that. So, your big question on how do you prioritize or how do you focus? That's the biggest and the most difficult job because you ask 10 different companies, what are the top 5 things you're working on? Probably 2 out of 5 would be overlap. And then some things are going to be unique to depending what part of the ecosystem they're from. And so our job is to work on how are we going to have the biggest amount of scale and most meaningful output for the organizations that we're supporting.
Now, Vertex seems like a really extraordinary cool, and I can imagine lots of use cases. We'll include a link to some version of the documentation in the show notes so people can find it and check it out.
Yeah.
So Vertex is a generative AI engine of sorts. Are you also doing things with other LLM type technologies, or are those making it into the healthcare and life science ecosystem in your cloud as well? Or what are you seeing some of the demand for LLMs?
There are plenty of needs and desire to collaborate and leverage large language models, right, in the healthcare and life science space. We're continuing to contribute to many open source LLMs. We're continuing to build custom ones that you will continue to hear more and more about. But then there's even partners. We also have partners with LLM providers, companies like Cohere or Anthropic, who've actually made a lot of their models available to healthcare and life science customers through their platform. So that allows future customers some flexibility so they can identify what are those LLMs that they want to work with or that they'd like to. But other ones that you may have also heard about is specifically MedLM, what Google developed, MedLM, to be adopted on different medical data sets and integrated with other LLM to enhance its capabilities. It's the MedLM that got a lot of publicity around being able to take medical entrance exams with a very, very high rate of passing and accuracy.
It's really cool, but it also, it raises some issues, and you've alluded to some of these, right? This is a regulated space. Well, parts of it are regulated space, but there's also, historically, it's like, where'd you get that diagnosis? Well, I went to Dr. Google, right? People will search for their symptoms, and I feel like in the world of consumer-facing LLMs, this creates great power, but also poses a great risk. So, how are you thinking a little bit about, I guess we can call it the ethical concerns, or at least, the human impact or the risks associated with applying technology to healthcare applications?
I am so glad that you asked me that question because you will always hear me say, right? There's a couple of things that I will always say that I haven't had a chance to say here, but everything is about keeping a human in the loop. We will be at a world in the future where we all have great trust in this system. But right now, as we are all learning in the capabilities and what these technologies can do, it is very important to do it with a human in the loop, as well as in, I would say, in structured, iterative manner so that you can actually trace everything back. I was sitting on a panel in Washington, D.C. around medical data, and somebody in the audience had asked me a question around, what do you think about what if the output is biased? And I remember having to stop everyone on the panel. I say, just to put this very clearly, the output of AI cannot be biased unless the data that you put in there was biased to begin with, right? It's our responsibility to ensure that that we're meeting these standards of the ethical and the fair data principles that we all are always trying to adhere to. But, since you're asking me this question, I'll take a couple of moments to share a little bit about some of the mechanisms and things that happen inside of Google in order to create a balance between navigating innovation, but also the responsibility, if that's okay.
Yeah, please.
So think about it from a compliance and security perspective, right? We are continuing to prioritize, or Google Cloud is continuing to prioritize compliance, right, with key regulators, HIPAA, GDPR, others that are going to be relevant for healthcare and life sciences. There's always going to be, of course, layers of security that are going to be part of the infrastructure for protections against threats. But then your commentary around the ethics fear piece, right? There are ethical considerations, right? There's going to be the fairness and the bias mitigation. But then there's also the responsibility of ensuring when we're training models that there are diverse data sets, there are fairness metrics. And then one of my most important comments that I make is around explainability. For example, if you were a radiologist and I asked you, I said, hey, this output of this algorithm said you have 100 images, don't focus on these 90. Here's the 10 that you should spend more time on.
Right.
Right now, you're not going to blindly say, okay, I'm not going to look at those 90. You, as a radiologist, also need to understand why those 90 were discarded or said that they don't need, additional viewing or what have you. And so I think that's a big, big piece of the explainability is it's not just the technical individuals that need to understand about the explainability. There are also levels of responsibility that people like yourself and me and the radiologist and everyone else, that it can't just be a black box. We all are responsible and as future participants of our healthcare ecosystem that includes technology, we also need to all have a level of understanding of how these models work. And of course, there's the transparency and the accountability piece and the fair principles that I've already addressed a little bit.
I love your cup half full version of the AI cannot be biased if the data are not biased, but because I always get the question the other way, which is the model will absolutely be biased if the data are biased. And of course, it's one of the pernicious challenges in healthcare is bias, and the one that I talk most about, my soapbox about representation in the data, right? Simply by virtue of the fact that marginalized groups, and here I'm including women in that category, are underrepresented in healthcare data. Socioeconomically disadvantaged groups are underrepresented, and so I think it's incumbent on all of us in the space then to go the extra mile to first acknowledge that exists and then work hard to make sure the data are representative.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, so a drum we beat on a lot. This has been fantastic and fascinating. I want to just kind of steer towards a couple crystal ball questions to wrap up. Maybe first we can just ask for a couple examples. You gave one earlier, in fact, with I believe it was your recursion example and your bear example, which are oncology use cases. Because Genialis, my company, works so squarely in the oncology space, I'll just ask you to first prognosticate how your work at Google Cloud aims to and will impact cancer care more generally. But then the big follow-up question is simply, if you do your job right, if Google is a successful, layer in the sea change we're seeing with technology and life science and healthcare, what does the world look like in 10 years? How does that actually change healthcare? So I'd like to start with cancer and then go broad.
Yeah. What I'm going to say is I just want to be very clear, right? This is not that this is all available and it's all been solved for, right? But cancer is a key focus in Google because it is a key focus for you, right? And for the industry. And so we are working on several initiatives that are aimed to improve cancer care, including early detection. How can we support personalized treatments? How can patients be supported, right? You mentioned earlier in the conversation, we all go to Google when we get any kind of diagnosis, any kind of symptom. And so, how do we use the power that we have here in order to support with information for patients, right? So, they can be developing AI models to identify cancerous lesions in medical images. It could be predicting treatment responses, and it can even be assisting in the drug discovery processes. We are working with a variety of tools to help different patients manage their care and connect with support networks. Because when we're talking about cancer, you think, right, Google is historically a consumer company, right? The ability for us to support Google to support not just with its technology and to be able to help create the next best medicine or the diagnosis, but also with patients in their care journey. I think it's a very, very powerful opportunity for us. So getting some into some quick specifics. There's opportunities to apply deep learning for some of the improved screening capabilities. So there's a lot of algorithms that are currently being trained to analyze different medical images. Think pathology, think mammograms, think variety of these type of medical images for detection, right? Faster interventions, theoretically, better outcomes. There's also treatment optimization. How can you predict treatment response based on model development? How will you versus myself versus somebody else respond to these different therapies? We've talked a little bit about the drug discovery piece, right? But there's a lot of opportunity in developing new medicine, target and lead optimization. How can we use AI to better reduce that funnel that we always talk about? That is one of the most lengthy parts of the process. And then, as I said, I think that there's such a huge opportunity for us to support not just cancer, but I would say, all health is around patient support and information, being able to provide reliable information, right? Accurate information, trustworthy information about cancer, about how patients can get help, about how families can make informed decisions, and then connecting them with the right resources. And while it seems as simple as a Google search, there's a lot that goes on in the back end to make sure that you're getting the right and relevant information as well.
No, I appreciate that. In my modest tinkerings with the various competing LLM chatbot, I've always been impressed with the focus of Google's Gemini on citation and references. I understand that was a key driver from the outset was, can you trust the thing I'm being told? which is so important in healthcare.
Yes, exactly.
But that's super encouraging and, amazing to think that companies like Google can be such a major partner in the advancement of these tools for beating cancer. More generally, kind of as the impact on healthcare, not so much, Google's impact, but how do you see healthcare as a space different 10 years from now because of efforts like what you have ongoing at the cloud? And obviously you're not, you guys aren't doing this alone, right? It's a big ecosystem. So maybe the question is simply more of what will technology's impact be on healthcare in, say, 10 years? Could be however many years you want.
Yeah, exactly. I can give you some specific things based on, what I'm seeing. We were already talking about this, but right, looking at a world where we're going to be much more predictive and proactive. So my personal philosophy has been always around well care, not sick care, right? How are we getting to a world where we don't actually have to wait for the physical symptoms to manifest for us to be able to know that there's something happening? And then maybe even to a point where we're not even going to be getting that sickness or that diagnosis because we've already eradicated that. So I think what I'm seeing that technology can do for us in the next decade or longer is really making healthcare much more precise and making it much more personalized. I think that's going to be the key to using AI in this industry is early detection, continuous health. Those are going to be the key parts of what is going to drive my hope for the future, which is going to be well care and not sick care.
I love that you ended on that. This has been the thought that I have been able to shake all year, starting with the panel I sat on at JP Morgan in January. And one of the panelists said this very directly, said, we don't have a healthcare system in the US. We have a sick care system in the US. And what I'm interested in is building that healthcare or well care system. And I have not been able to shake that concept all year. And I think it's a wonderful place for us to end today. Thank you so much for your time today. This was a fascinating discussion. And again, I'm just heartened to know that companies like Google are bringing so many resources to bear on these problems.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation today.
This has been another episode of the Talking Precision Medicine podcast, brought to you by Genialis. Hopefully by now you've subscribed to the show, but if not, go ahead and click that subscribe button and leave us a review. And please do pay us a visit at www.genialis.com. That's www.genialis.com to learn more about how AI is transforming precision medicine. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.